Hey everybody, how's it going? I have my good friend Gary, Physical Format Rock and Roll, and this is a part two of kind of a Rolling Stones series of videos that we've been doing. We did the Brian Jones era, our top 10 songs, about a month ago, I think it was. And today we want to follow that up and we want to cover the Mick Taylor era. So basically, Mick Taylor era, we are talking about the Let It Bleed album, Sticky Fingers, Exile on Main Street, Goat's Head Soup, and It's Only Rock and Roll. All of these, with the exception of this album, were produced by Jimmy Miller. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Rolling Stones fan who didn't consider this era, as far as albums go, probably the golden era of the Rolling Stones. I think most people, at least one of those albums is probably their favorite. Some might consider Beggar's Banquet, but for the most part, and it was definitely a period of transition. I feel like, the Brian Jones era, it was the 60s, it was the psychedelia. You had kind of the poppiness of some of their work. And then after Brian Jones was dismissed from the band and they got Mick Taylor, it felt like, well, now we can really stretch out. Now we can start kicking ass. We can start really becoming the band that I think everybody knows and loves. But, any initial thoughts about the Mick Taylor era before we get into our list, Gary?
Yeah. Well, I think you definitely hit it on the nail on the head there. It is the sweet spot for the Rolling Stones, probably starting with the Beggar's Banquet. I realize Mick wasn't on that, but once he added it, they kind of got better by going backwards a little bit. They went a little more bluesier, and they got Mick Taylor from John Mayall's Blues Breakers band. He was already playing in there, and they liked what they heard, and it added something that Brian Jones was very good at several instruments. That's what he added to the Rolling Stones. But with Mick Taylor, he was a bona fide guitar hero that they added to the band. And, depending on who you talk to, right, a lot of people consider him the best guitar player to have ever been in the Rolling Stones. His slide guitar work is up there with anybody. You could throw him up there with the Ry Cooters and people like that. He is an exceptional player, and he added a lot of muscle to the Rolling Stones, and that's what makes those albums so special. And as we'll see as we're going through these songs, he could adapt to different styles too. He wasn't just a remarkable slide player.
Well, and I think he helped the Stones stay contemporary because you had, Jimi Hendrix, you had Cream, you had all these, Led Zeppelin, you had all these bands where you had like a really exceptional guitar player, and Rolling Stones didn't have that. I mean, Keith Richards, I'm not trying to disparage Keith Richards, but just in terms of, keeping up with the bands of that time, where in some cases you had that two guitar interplay, I think it really was critical that they got Mick Taylor. And I mean, not that Brian Jones, as we discussed before, wasn't an integral member. He founded the band, for crying out loud, but, the time had come for him to go. And tragically, he passed away. I mean, some people, I think, have the misconception that, he died and then the Rolling Stones got Mick Taylor. He'd been let go. Brian Jones had been let go. I think it was June of 1969, and then he passed away in July of 1969. And Mick Taylor was already in the band when Brian Jones had passed away. So they were already, touring, and, obviously that ill-fated tour that ended at Altamont. But yeah, I think Mick Taylor definitely, helped the Rolling Stones stay vital and stay relevant into the 1970s. But we're going to do our top 10 list. We're going to start with number 10 and work our way all the way to number 1. So, Gary, you want to start with your number 10?
Yeah. So I kind of, after you gave me the idea of what you wanted to do for the video, I kind of try to make all of my selections ones that I feel like Mick Taylor definitely had an influence on, or that, if he wasn't the integral part of the song, the song was much better because he was on it. So that's, I wouldn't necessarily say these are my top 10 favorite songs of that era, but they're my top 10 favorite Mick Taylor songs. And some of them are just my basic top songs anyway. But anyway, after that long-winded speech, my first pick is You Gotta Move, which is off of Sticky Fingers. That's a remake. That's a Fred McDowell blues song. I mean, several people have done that song, but I love that song. I think they do a great job. I like the way Mick sings it, and Mick Jagger. And Mick Taylor, his guitar work, his slide guitar in there is just so awesome. He does such a good job of sounding like, hey, this could have came, from the 1940s or 50s or something. I love it. I love that song, man. And I just think that's like, that's just something right there. It's like, hey, we need to do this. Let's do this old blues sounding song. Mick Taylor's like, I got it. And so that's my first pick.
Yeah, well, the Rolling Stones were at their best when they were doing the blues.
Oh, yeah.
That's almost a song that could have fit very well on Beggar's Banquet because it's got that whole feel.
It definitely does.
Yeah, but I love that tune. That's a great track. My number 10 is going to be Time Waits for No One off the It's Only Rock and Roll album. It's just a very unique track. It's sort of, It's Only Rock and Roll kind of was that transition from like the late 60s, early 70s, just kind of balls of the wall, boogie rock stuff. And then, it's got Time Waits for No One is so far removed from Time Is on My Side, but it's a very reflective, kind of a pensive sort of song. I love the way the song ends. It's like an extended kind of guitar solo there at the end, which I think is great. It's a real gentle Rolling Stones track. And not that they hadn't done anything like that before, but for some reason that song has always been one of my favorites off of that album, which I think, is sort of, it was the first one that they self-produced, the Glimmer Twins.
Right. Yeah.
So it's got a bit of a different sound than we had heard before from the Rolling Stones, but I like it. And, I like everything about it, but I like, Mick Taylor's guitar work at the end of that song and how it just sort of goes on and on and on. And it's a long track. They could have edited it and maybe they did edit it for radio. I don't know. But anytime I heard it on the radio, they always played the full version of it. But yeah, that's my number 10.
Well, that's going to show up again. So,
all right.
That's a beautiful song. My next pick is off of Let It Bleed. Now, Mick only played on a couple songs on that album. He's not on the full album, but one of the ones he did was Live With Me. And I picked that one because that's like the first time you get to hear interplay between Mick and Keith Richards. And Keith Richards always talks about how, he likes to have the guitars weave together. And on this one, they're actually trading off on solos. They each get to do some pretty biting guitar solos. The further along they went, the less guitar solos that Keith Richards did, you know, just because Mick Taylor was a better soloist than Keith. It's the same way now with Ron Wood. You know, if you see the Stones live, Ron Wood probably plays 80% of the solos. And that's not to put down Keith Richards. He's a great rhythm player and a songwriter, you know, and that's kind of, I think that's what he likes. That's what he gets off on. But I picked Live With Me because that's the first time you hear both those guys playing together and playing off of each other. And it's just a great song too. It's just a great kick-ass Rolling Stones song. So,
well, I feel like that's, yeah, I feel like that's like the first song where the bass riff carries that song. I mean, I've never heard Bill Wyman, his bass line be like the melody of that track. And I love the fact you've got, you know, Keith and Mick just going at it like back and forth, tit for tat on that track. And you just that bass. I love that riff, which starts right off at the beginning of that track. And, you know, I love Mick Jagger's I Got Nasty Habit. You know, that's on like embrace.
I drink tea at 3.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of
it doubles up on the drums too, you know. And I don't know, have you ever heard I can't remember what live albums are on, but like they've got the one where Sheryl Crow sings it with them. And then I've heard Christina Aguilera sing with them, and those are both pretty cool. That seems to be a song where
Shine a Light.
Is it on that one? That movie?
I don't know. I'd have to look. Like you, they put out so many lately.
Yeah, they blend together. But I know Cheryl is on one of them. She sang it with them, and that was always pretty cool.
Yeah.
She was a big Stones fan, and to see her duet. There's a couple songs that Mick, when they have guest stars, they sing, you know, with them like that. Like when they did Memory Motel, and they had what's his nuts? Who's the guy? I can't think of the guy's name. I don't like the band, but I know I think you like him.
Are you talking about Jack White?
No, I like Jack White. What's the guy? You know, he sings Crash. They sing the song Crash. The band. They're kind of like a jam band in a way.
God, I can't think of it.
I don't know. One of us we'll think of it.
Yeah. All right.
It's eluding me, but we'll think of it. I don't want to get stuck on it.
We're showing our age right now. Yeah. All right. My number 9 is going to be off the Exile on Main Street album. I'm going to go with Happy. I love the guitar sound that Keith gets on that and uses it again on like Emotional Rescue and also Tattoo You, kind of that, I don't even know what to call it, like kind of that rollicking guitar sound that he gets. It's a Keith Richards vocal, which, you know, Keith doesn't sing that much, but the fact that he does it all, I think is very cool. Yeah, that's always been one of my favorite tracks on there. You know, a little bit of brass at the end, but you know, for me, it makes me happy when I hear it. But
I love his vocal on that, and I love it. I love it when they do it live, and it's like, you know, Keith has this raggedy way of doing it where he's always like just coming up to the microphone at the last second, pulls away at the last word, and then Mick is up there singing the chorus with them. You know, baby, why don't you make me happy?
Yeah, I like that Ladies and Gentlemen, the Rolling Stones, you know, that live film. I think they did a version of it. And that, I don't know if you've ever seen that. But yeah, you know, it's definitely cool to hear Keith kind of in his, you know, I don't know what you want to call it, just sort of very loose kind of a way, tackling a vocal like that. And I never heard anybody else's guitar sound like that. I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, he's got that, you know, he's always doing open tunings, and you know, he's just got that it almost has like a carnival sound, right? You know, that ring to it that he gets when you do the open tuning.
Yeah, it's kind of like he does it again, like on Little TNA a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I love that. Dave Matthews Band is who I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's what I had said. Yeah, I think yeah, I'm not a huge Dave Matthews fan, but you know,
yeah, I just can't get into them. Anyway, my next song is Dead Flowers, off of Sticky Fingers. Always love that song. You know, got a great country feel to it. You know, that's of course when Keith Richards was hanging around Graham Parsons a lot, and he definitely had an influence on, you know, from Let It Bleed through Exile on Main Street. His influence can be heard on those albums. And they did those country sounding songs, and a lot of times Mick would not necessarily try to sing it like a regular country kind of thing, because he said he didn't feel comfortable doing it. So a lot of times he said he would either sing it like kind of jokingly or sing it like a blues guy doing a country song. And I love the words in that. And that's another one that Mick and Keith both have some really good interplay in it. Like you'll hear the guitar lines, you know, like every time Mick sings a line, Mick Jagger sings a line, that little, you know, after he does it, that's Keith. And then the solo, that's Mick Taylor, the little bit more elaborate guitar solo in there. So that's just another good example of those guys playing together to create one fantastic sound. So that's why I put Dead Flowers on it.
Yeah, I always felt like, you know, the character in that song is the same one from Dear Doctor. You know, he's kind of putting on the same country hick sort of a voice. When you're sitting there in your silk upholstered chair, you know, that kind of whole thing. I think he liked having fun with that southern voice of his.
I love all the country songs that the Rolling Stones do. You know, I think it'd be kind of cool if they just did a whole album like that sometimes, you know, because they do such a good job of them. When you think of the different songs that they have that are like country songs, and you're like, oh yeah, I love that song. You know?
Well, and Keith was hanging out with Graham Parsons around this time, so you've got that influence, because Graham Parsons, obviously, you know, he was in the Flying Burrito Brothers, he was in the Byrds for an album, you know, he influenced so many people, you know, died again tragically very young, but I know he was a huge influence. If you read Keith's book Life, talks about, you know, how much Graham Parsons influenced him, and I think, you know, that song in particular definitely shows that they'd been hanging out a lot. My number 8 is going to be off the Sticky Fingers album. I'm going with Wild Horses.
Beautiful.
Yeah, love that track. And I was like, God, how can I rank it this low, you know, in my top 10? But just that just shows how great an era this was, that Wild Horses is, you know, this far down on my list. But I mean, you know, what can you say about it that hasn't already been said? It's got a very affectionate lyric. It's, you know, and I think it was actually, if I'm not mistaken, Marianne Faithfull had a drug overdose or something, or she was in the hospital because she'd OD'd or something like that. And Mick Jagger was at her bedside and came up with these lyrics or something like that. For some reason, I thought I remembered reading that was the inspiration behind this song, you know, about wild horses couldn't drag me away. But
you know, all that stuff seems to depend on when they're interviewed, because like I've heard that, and then I've also seen quotes where Mick said no, it didn't have anything to do, it wasn't about her, you know. Same way with the song Angie. of who that's about and who it's not about. You know, I mean, one time they'll say it was inspired by somebody. The next time it's like, no, we just basically kind of made that up. It wasn't really about anybody. So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of, I don't know. Structurally, it reminds me a little bit of Ruby Tuesday, obviously without some of the flourishes on that song, but it's just definitely a very acoustic based song. And then you've got the drums and the chorus, and it kind of picks up a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a great tender ballad and one of the Stones' best ballads, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I agree. And that's to me, that's another good song. That's a good example of Charlie Watts and his, you know, little is enough type approach, because what he does add in that song, you know, like you say, he comes in more in the choruses and it sounds bigger there. And he doesn't really do a whole lot, you know, in the verses. It's another example of Charlie Watts saying, this is what's perfect for this song.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you get these people who, like we've said this a million times before, but you get some of the highfalutin people who like to insult like a Charlie Watts and a Ringo Starr. Well, you know, they just had these little small drum sets, and you know, they don't have the double bass drum, and they're not pounding like this, so they suck. It's like, no, they don't suck. They do. They do what's needed for those songs. They're the perfect drummers for those bands.
Well, and it wasn't about them. It wasn't about, hey, let me show off. Let me show you how great I am. It's about the song, you know, and I think that's definitely Charlie Watts always was in the service of that particular song and that particular feel. But yeah, I agree. And that's a great comparison with Ringo Starr, because a lot of people shit on Ringo Starr because, well, show me a great song that he ever drummed on, and his drums aren't even mic'd up that great and all of that. But yeah, I think Wild Horses, like you say, is a great example of him just the right, you know, percussion on that particular track.
You want to hear a great Ringo Starr song? How about She Came In Through the Bathroom Window? That's a good example of doing a little more than what you might think.
Or she said, she said.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a good one. Okay, my next pick, and so Wild Horses is not in my top 10, but if I was going strictly by my top 10 songs of that era, that would be in it. But like I said, I tried to focus a little more on Mick Taylor, his involvement. So my next pick is Winter, which is off of Goat Head Soup. And I picked that because, I mean, I like that song. I think it's a good ballad. You used the word pensive earlier. That's a good way to describe this song also. I think it's a beautiful song. It's very melancholy. And this is a Mick Jagger and Mick Taylor composition. It says Jagger Richards, you know, so they didn't even give any credit to Mick Taylor, but Keith Richards is not even on that song. There are different times throughout the Stones' career where there's certain songs where Keith didn't show up to the studios. Same way with Bill Wyman. There's a lot of times where Bill Wyman didn't show up, so somebody else played bass. So the guitar on that song, I think it might be a little bit of rhythm by Mick Jagger, because he was actually starting to play rhythm guitar on some of these songs during this 4 or 5 album period. But that's mostly just Mick Taylor doing that. So I'm going to give Mick Taylor some credit here that they didn't give him on the album.
And I think that's one of the reasons why he left, is because he wasn't getting signed.
Yeah, it is.
They were just,
and you can't blame him. You know, I mean, that's where the money comes in, right? You know, the publishing and stuff. And he would contribute to these songs and not get the co-writing credit. I mean, now it's like Ron Wood is the same way in the band. Every now and then you'll see his name pop up there, but not near as much as, you know, he's contributing enough to those songs to where he should be getting the songwriting credit, but he doesn't. But I think he just kind of goes along with it, you know.
Well, that album, just to talk a little bit about that album, because the next song that I'm gonna that's on my list is actually from Goat's Head Soup. I mean, there couldn't have been an album more different than Exile on Main Street than Goat's Head Soup. When you
Yeah,
got songs that would have never in a million years fit on Goat's Head Soup, like Can You Hear the Music and 100 Years Ago, Angie, you know, it was just a different feel to that album. I think Billy Preston actually plays keyboards a lot on that album. But it's just got a different feel, and it's almost like they deliberately went in a different direction. Like, okay, we've done like 3 albums of this, you know, balls out rock and roll right now. We want to kind of change it up a little bit and add some different colors to the palette. And I think it's an underrated album. People think like, oh, it was such a disappointment coming after Exile on Main Street, but you know, they could have done, you know, Sticky Fingers, Exile on Main Street, you know, the sequel to both those albums, but they didn't. They decided to branch out a little bit and
yeah,
in a different direction.
yeah. I think so. I think that those, you know, Sticky Fingers and Exile, Let It Bleed to an extent, you know, were much more bluesy albums. And like you said, yeah, it's kind of like they almost said it's almost like a conscious thing. Okay, let's don't be quite so bluesy. Let's, you know, mix in some other kind of things in here with it. So
yeah, even Silver Train would have sounded out of place on Exile. It's a blues song, but it's not. It's
yeah, but it's different
than anything on either of, you know, Sticky Fingers or Exile. But my number 7 pick is going to be Angie. You know, which of course was written for Angie Dickinson. Tender Ballad. You know, it's just you know, one of the I don't know. It's got strings on it, which is odd because I don't know the last time the Rolling Stones had strings on an album, which is interesting, but probably their most, I don't know. I mean, we just talked about Wild Horses, but Angie, I think, is still a little farther in that kind of mellow, soft rock kind of direction. But I think it works. I like it a lot. You know, I've got already 3 mellow Stones tracks. We're only 4 songs in, and already 3 of them have been kind of like, you know, the lighter side of the Stones. But yeah, I mean, I know it's not about Angie Dickinson. It may be about David Bowie's girlfriend, Angie, whoever. Like you say, same, you know, explanation they gave about Wild Horses could have been about anybody. They probably don't even remember who it was about themselves anymore. They've told so many different stories, or there's been so much speculation about who Angie is, and who really cares. I mean, it's a great song, great track. One of the centerpieces of this album, and made a great single too, one of their best singles to my way of thinking anyway.
No, I agree. Once again, that's another song, would be my top 10 if I went that way, because I absolutely love that song. I'm just going to open this door real quick here.
All right. See, this
I got a dog outside. Keep scratching.
Yeah, we're so laid back. This is such an informed thing. We can take time out to go to the bathroom. We can go let the dog out. We can go beat the kids, you know, whatever. It's that kind of a show. It's that kind of a channel. But
just chill.
Yeah, we can openly.
Well, you know, you're doing all these mellow songs. So.
I know, it's put me in that kind of a wistful mood. But
you know what though? I mean,
all right. So just I promise that's the last.
Those mellow songs are some of my favorite Stone songs. Yeah. Really, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Nobody does songs like that, you know, in the way they do it. That's one of the reasons I love the Rolling Stones, is because I like those slow songs just as much, if not more, than a lot of their rocking songs.
Well, and they've always been that way. I mean, you go back to Tell
Yeah.
Me or As Tears Go By.
Yeah.
Not like
Perfect.
all of a sudden Angie was some, them breaking the mold. I mean, they've always had that side to them. But it's a more contemporary kind of a ballad for the Rolling Stones. So
It's kind of like, they took the weird kind of guitar structure like of a Paint It Black, and they use that with Angie for like a ballad, because it starts out that A minor, Angie, the A minor to C, whatever it goes, I don't know. But anytime that you start out a song in a minor chord like that, it just automatically gives it a different feel, and that just goes throughout that song.
yeah.
So it's awesome. Okay, my next pick, I don't know what number we're on, but now this song, it was like, I don't know if this was the first one that they worked on. It was released as a single, but it's Honky Tonk Woman, sorry. And the reason why I'm picking this, it's also a great song. But when this song was originally written by Mick and Keith, it was a country song. And like that version you hear on Let It Bleed when they do Country Honk, that was how it was originally done. They were staying on a ranch at the time on vacation when they came up with that, and they said that there were horses and everything around, so they were kind of inspired by that. And it was Mick Taylor who had the idea of transforming it into this rock blues song. And so I kind of feel like they never would have had quite the big hit, obviously, if it was just the country. I mean, I like the song Country Honk too, but they would have not had the gigantic hit if Mick Taylor hadn't maybe gave them the inspiration to, hey, let's change this around a bit. I'm not saying he's entirely responsible for that, but I think he was the main cog on that to get it that way. And then also that cowbell at the beginning is actually a couple of cowbells, and that's actually Jimmy Miller doing that. And that's why that song is you got that cowbell going, and then Charlie Watts comes in, and you actually have two different time signatures for a little bit going on at the same time. That's why it's tricky for a drummer sometimes to do that and to get that same feel on that song. And that is also, I don't know, when Ricky Nelson, when he was playing, he went on an oldies circuit, an oldies show. They had it at Madison Square Garden. He played his version of Honky Tonk Women, and it was kind of more along the lines of the country honk a little bit, but he got booed by the people because all they wanted to hear was those hits. And that's how he came up with the song Garden Party. Garden Party, Madison Square Garden. That's how he came up with that. Of course, then he ended up having a big hit with that, but that was the inspiration for that song. So.
Yeah, well, and I feel like Charlie Watts, that's the first thing you hear, and just carries that track for me. I love his drumming on there. I wish they'd mic him up like that more often, because it's just that perfect drum beat, and it's a great dance song.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah,
fantastic.
It's a great dance song. It's got like 3 chords in the whole song, I think. I mean, it's awesome. You probably have Voodoo Lounge, don't you? So the song I Go Wild, you talk about his drums being mic'd up. Now that's a time where I don't think they've ever been more mic'd up than they are at that song when they go in a chorus. If any of you are not familiar with that song by the Rolling Stones, I Go Wild, go look that up. That's an awesome song off of that album.
Yeah. No question. That's a great one. I love that. Why isn't that on my list? I don't know. I guess I forget, because it wasn't on an album, because it was a single. For
Right.
flew off my radar, but I'm glad you put it on there so we could give it some recognition.
Yeah, just the song itself too. I mean, the words in it, the vocals, everything is just great. Even the horns that they add, I'm not normally a big horn guy, but when they add that, even that sounds cool. It's got kind of like, it's almost like two different characters, right? The one's a gin-soaked barroom queen in Memphis, and the other's a divorcee from New York City.
Yeah, that line, I never knew like what he was saying when I was growing up, because I didn't know what a divorcee was. I didn't know what laid meant,
Yeah.
a laid, divorce. What is he talking? Is he speaking? What the hell is that? I couldn't make out what the hell he was talking about. And then as I got older, I was like, oh yes, okay. Light bulb went off. Okay, I get it now.
Yeah, and then of course you got the whole, she blew my nose and blew my mind. And, of course, your mind starts going elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Stones were good at that.
A lot of the Rolling Stones lyrical context was lost on me as a young man.
I'm sure.
Hey, but
shut up.
All right, my number 6 is going to be the title track off my favorite Rolling Stones album, Let It Bleed. Let It Bleed. There's not a single part of this song that I don't totally love. I love the beginning where Key sounds like he's tuning his guitar. And then you got that guitar strumming coming in. I mean, Charlie Watts, when those drums crash in like that, it's just fantastic. Mick Jagger not sounding like Mick Jagger at the beginning of that track. I remember hearing that when my dad played it when I was a little kid, thinking, who's that on vocals? That's like a weird vocal, because well, we on, he's got, I can't do it justice, but it's like singing that song, it doesn't even sound like Mick Jagger, which I always think is cool when you got a vocalist who kind of mixes it up a little bit. But I just love that track. I love the slide guitar on there, I think is magic. The piano on there, Nicky Hopkins, is fantastic. Just a great song. Not my favorite, as we'll see as I go through. Damn it, I used to love that. My dad would crank that song up, and so I think from an early age I always identified and loved that track. But yeah,
I love it. I agree, that's a great song. And you're right about Mick. I mean, that's a perfect example of Mick. That's what's great about Mick Jagger. You would never say Mick Jagger is like an amazing singer, but he's a great vocalist as far as adapting to, changing his voice just a little bit. He doesn't have the voice of a Robert Plant or that powerful voice like a young Roger Daltrey, things like that. But he can, we just talked about him singing like the country songs, and then he can sing Let It Bleed, which is, another voice that he pulls out. And then you think of like, some of the things he does on the Some Girls album. He manages to take what he has and use it to the best that anybody could do. I mean, it's just, and the crazy thing is, if you've ever been like in a bar band or something and you're learning a Rolling Stones song and you try to sing it, it always comes out sounding stupid. People sing it, but when you really listen to, you go to a bar, you watch a little band play, and it's like, yeah, this is good, but they never sounds as cool as Mick Jagger doing that song.
We all need someone we can lean
on.
Lean on.
And if you want to, you can lean on me.
Yeah. See, like right here, we can't do it.
We can't do it.
Yeah, as gifted a vocalist I am, I just can't that particular song. But, oh well.
Oh wow.
Now we're in our top 5. Now we're really getting into the
Now they're all great.
yeah.
This one would probably be in my top 10 either way. And this is off of Sticky Fingers. Once again, I'm kind of realizing I picked a lot of songs off of that as I look through this list. But anyway, Sway. It's just that demon life that's got me in its sway. Once again, that's another great version of Mick singing. And, you know, it's probably a little bit out of his range, a little bit, but it still manages to sound really good. And I threw this on there because this is definitely a showcase for Mick Taylor. It's another one of those songs. Keith Richards is not even on this song. Didn't show up in the studio that day. So all the guitar you hear on that is Keith, except for some rhythm guitar that once again Mick is playing on that. I think I'm guessing that Mick Jagger probably started playing some rhythm guitar because he didn't know if Keith was going to show up or not. But so that's the guitar you hear on. So you know that wonderful slide solo in there, and then that really cool solo in the second half of the song. I mean, that's all Mick Taylor, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why I'm putting that in there. It's just and I just love everything on that song too. The drums, the rhythm of it, the way it has that sweeping sound to the chorus. You know, it's just such a cool song. And it just, you know, when I think about that song and the time period it came out, you know, 71, they hadn't really done anything that sounded like that song at that time. You know, that was like a different sound for him, I think. And I just think it's an excellent song. So,
well, it's hard to follow up Brown Sugar. I mean,
yes,
you know, one of the Stones' most iconic opening tracks. And how do you follow that up? What's the track after that? And I think Sway is the perfect follow up to that song. And I was like, I wonder, you know, like in a situation like that, if Mick Jagger is thinking like, for fuck's sake, Keith, we just went through this shit with Brian. You know, like, it's not going to be you two. Now you can't come to the studio. Now you can't function, you know. And it was like whatever. But, you know, obviously Keith is a huge part of that album, and it's finish. There's not a weak track on it, but you know, probably Mick Taylor actually didn't mind that Keith wasn't there because he got a chance to shine and show what he could do. But
yeah, it's just the shame of it is, you know, and you already said it, you know, they had, you know, when they had Mick Taylor there, man, I mean, they had the perfect piece to the puzzle, and they were just so rooted in, you know, well, this is Mick and Keith's band. And, you know, them giving him the songwriting credits all the time and just not giving him his due. Yeah, kind of a shitty move on their, you know.
Dick move, Keith.
Yeah, dick move, man.
All right, my number 5, and this song, and this is from Keith's book, so I'm going to take his word for it. But he said he wrote this song. Mick Jagger was becoming something of an actor in the late 60s, and he was in a movie, I believe it was called Performance, with Anita Pallenberg, who was Keith Richards' girlfriend at the time. And Keith knew on the set that Mick and Anita were getting it on. I think there was a love scene in that movie. I haven't seen the movie, but this is just how Keith described it in his book. And so Anita and Mick, he knew they were like getting it on, and he knew that he had taken Anita away from Brian Jones, and now he felt like he was watching Mick Jagger take his girlfriend away from him. And so he went while Mick was away filming this movie with his girlfriend. He wrote this song, and I'm talking about "Gimme Shelter." And I mean, from the opening, it's got this ominous, what an ominous way to open that album. You've got the guitar lick of Keith Richards. You've got those stabbing, echoey piano chords, which just lend kind of like a dread. And it's a very bleak song. It's like, you know, holy shit, what has our world come to? It's a very apocalyptic kind of a track. I love that. I don't know who the vocalist is who is at the end of that song. She's a very soulful singer, which is the first time a female vocalist has ever been on a Rolling Stones track. It's just such a powerful song. Could have ranked us higher very easily. But one of the reasons why Let It Bleed is one of my favorite albums is because of this song, the way the track leads off. And it's just the whole package. It's epic. It's cinematic. Just every piece is perfect. It's not overdone. They could have easily gone over the top with it, but it's just so perfect. And you feel, you know, that sense of like, you know, especially, I mean, I didn't grow up, I was born in 1970. So obviously I wasn't around at that time, but you know, it was just sort of like the hangover, like the 60s, the free love and the hippie shit that was going on. And you just had, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy assassinated. You had troops getting killed in Vietnam. There was war. You know, it was just like, what happened to this decade? How did this decade get away from us? You know, we were all about peace and love in 1967. And now here we are 2 years later, and it feels like the world is unraveling. And it's just, it so perfectly captures the mood of that time. You know, I know I'm being very, I'm using a lot of hyperbole here, but I don't know any other way to kind of, you know, talk about this song.
I think that song warrants that though. You know, once again, I did not put that in my top 10 only because, you know, that's a Keith Richards showcase. You know, and I was trying to go more for the Mick Taylor stuff. But that song is you know, probably, you know, my only issue with it at the moment is overkill, just because I've heard it so many times. But at one point, you know, that was probably like my favorite song in the world. I love that song. You know, it's just brilliant. And everything you said about it, I can't really add a whole lot to it. You know, I mean, but the chorus itself, you know, murder, rape, war. It said, you know, you can't always understand what they're saying, but you know, that's what's going on there. It's just a kiss away. And it's just, you know, it's like, it almost sounds like a very apocalyptic song, but at the same time, you know, maybe there is some hope, you know.
Yeah.
And it has an impending sense of doom with those opening chords that they have on there. And then that whole, you know, that's, you know, going through it. And the verses, it's a perfect song is what it is. You know, I know both of us, I think, have used it when we've done like the album openers, best album openers. Sorry. Obviously that is one of the best ones of all time.
Sure. Well, I like the fact, yeah, you bring it up. There is that hope at the end where, you know, love, sisters, it's just a kiss away.
Yeah.
You know, which is like, well, yeah, like it seems really bad right now, but like it's down to us. It's up to us. We can make it better. And, you know, there's still that, even though, you know, we're in a world of shit right now, there's still, you know, it comes down to you know, love and you know, what we can do to make things better. Yeah. So I like the fact that it's not just all gloom and doom. At the end, they offer up, you know,
yeah,
there is, you know, we've got a new decade, we can make things better. I mean, I'm a big Beatles fan, but I prefer Gimme Shelter way better than Give Peace a Chance or you know, any of those other anthems that, you know, we all love the Beatles for. But yeah, I just, one of my favorite album openers of all time, probably.
You know what I gotta wonder? That's one of those songs where, and I know we've done this before, but I always wonder what it would have been like if you were like say 17 or something, and that comes out. You know, you've already liked the Stones. You had Beggar's Banquet. You thought, wow, this is a big change, man. They sound really good. And then you put Drop the Needle on that, and you hear Give Me Shelter for the first time. I just can't help but think you'd be like, wow, mind blown. For one thing,
Mhm.
that album sounds so much better than Beggar's Banquet. Uh, Even though they're both done by Jimmy Miller, but that one sounds so much better, I think, on a just a sound level quality.
Yeah, yeah, I think they definitely Jimmy Miller stepped up his game. The Rolling Stones in general. And I think, the Beatles and Rolling Stones, I think they were challenging each other at that time. You had the White Album, you had Beggar's Banquet going head to head. And then it was like, okay, now what are we gonna do? For the Stones, it was Let It Bleed. For the Beatles, it was Abbey Road. Both great albums. And I mean, I love Abbey Road, but you put a gun to my head right now, I'm gonna say I like Let It Bleed better, top to bottom.
Yeah,
That's hard for
I
me
mean, I do
because I
too.
love Abbey Road, but I love Let It Bleed that much more.
It just has more of an edge to
Hmm.
it. But
Yeah. So I've lost all Beatles credibility out the window right now, obviously, but whatever.
well, it's not like you said you didn't think that Abbey Road wasn't great or anything.
Yeah.
You got to think of the quality of these albums. My next pick, what I got, just so you people know, when you see me jiggling, it's because this guy here is running into the camera as we're talking. He wants me to pay attention to him. My next pick, you already talked about, and it's good to talk about this since you just talked about Let It Bleed. Now we can just go casually into something else. But I picked Time Waits for No One off of It's Only Rock and Roll for a lot of the same things you said. It's just a great song. It has such a unique sound to it. And it is another showcase for Mick Taylor because that, all that soloing on there. And you talked about the solo at the end, how it just kind of goes on for a while and then fades out, and it almost has like a Spanish kind of flavor to it or something.
Yeah.
And to me, that was just another example of okay, Mick has done all this slide work on these earlier Stones blues type songs. Well, this isn't a blues song, and this has just kind of a weird sound to it. What are you going to do? He just does another great guitar solo. He just shows how versatile he was. And that's probably my favorite song off that album. And I know a lot of people, just kind of like what you was talking about, Goat's Head Soup. The fact that people shit on that album because of what it followed, the great albums that it followed. And a lot of people say the same thing about It's Only Rock and Roll. Well, that was the Stone 70s period, the mid 70s when they sucked and everything. And I love that album. I love the It's Only Rock and Roll album. And to me, that's just a great song on there.
Yeah, I think it's the closest the Rolling Stones ever got to yacht rock. I mean, and I don't mean that like in a negative way. I mean, I am a closet yacht rock fan, but there's just sort of that like, oh, this could fit right alongside Little River Band or Kodo.
Okay. All right, now you're getting carried away.
Yeah, but I mean, but like there's just a kind of that sense of it where it's just kind of a laid back and ooh, you got that guitar at the end. That's sort of a I don't know. I mean, but I think it's cool. All right, I'm gonna go totally the other end of the spectrum for my next pick, and that is gonna be a bitch from Fingers album. Yeah, what and I did a not to toot my own horn. I did a video, I don't know, it was like a year ago, I think, where I just kind of did like a Sticky Fingers album. and Bitch. I mean, crank that up on your stereo. I mean, it is so I don't know. I think it's great. There seemed to be a lot of bitch songs back then. You had Queen Bitch by David Bowie, you had The Bitch Is Back by Elton John, you got the Stones. I mean, like within the space of a couple of years, you had all these bitch songs, people getting it out of their system, I guess. But yeah, it's just a great, like you can like Keith Richards has never made any secret about how much he loves Chuck Berry. Obviously, the Stones were very much influenced by Chuck Berry, and that's a riff straight out of the Chuck Berry Encyclopedia. It's a perfect riff. It's down. It's dirty. I don't know. It's the perfect Rolling Stones rocker. For me, it's one of the highlights off that album. Not the last song that's going to be on my list from that album, incidentally, but yeah, just a gritty guitar showcase for Mick Taylor and Keith Richards.
Yeah, that's another good example of them playing together, interplay, because that's definitely got both of them going on that one. Very snarling vocals by Mick Jagger, and it just sticks in your head. And then that's another song where they add horns to it, at the end, and it adds to it. Yeah, that's a cool choice.
Yeah.
Okay, my next pick. This is what, number 3.
Yep.
And well, we're not going too far. I picked "Can't You Hear Me Knocking." That's just another great riff led song. And that's another good example of Keith Richards and Mick Taylor working together on that song. And I like the way it also has that part in the chorus where it kind of changes, and it has that more swooping kind of sound to it, as opposed to that real jagged kind of the verses, and the way he Mick just kind of yells out those vocal lines. And then that whole thing they do at the end of that song, that last 4 minutes of that song is just a jam.
It's my favorite Santana song.
Yeah, it is, right, exactly. That's basically what it is. And from my understanding of what I've always heard is that was just not planned. They had the song, and then they just kept jamming on it. And they've got the great saxophone solo in there, and they've got Mick Taylor. That's him doing all those solos at the end, and that's just off the cuff shit there. That wasn't planned out. They just let the tape keep rolling. They didn't even realize they were being recorded. They just kept playing and jamming on that song. All that stuff, whether it's true or not, but I mean, that's what I've heard. That was just all improvised stuff. And when you think about that, it's like, holy shit, that's incredible, man. If that's the case. And I've also heard that it was Santana influenced, but that's kind of what was going through their head when they were jamming on it. And that's all Mick Taylor there at the end doing all that guitar stuff. I mean, some of it's horns too, like we said, but just another great example of Keith and Mick Taylor working together. And it's just a great fun song. It's got the snarling vocals in it too.
Yeah, well, I mean, that album is an embarrassment of riches for the Rolling Stones. It's like, okay, we've had Brown Sugar, we've had Wild Horses, we've had Bitch, we've had Can't You Hear Me? Like, come on. There. I mean, can you imagine another band, contemporary band of the Rolling Stones? It's like, seriously, like, I give up.
Yes.
Like, there's no.
Well, it had to be, to think that, people probably say, well, wow, the Stones did Beggar's Banquet, then they did Let It Bleed. They got to be running out of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, now we made one and sound wise, it's even better than Let It Bleed.
Yeah, and you know what? We're gonna do we're gonna make it a double album, and it's gonna be one of the greatest albums of all time. Exile, you know, it's like they weren't even done. It's like
I know.
album like Sticky Fingers, which is a perfect album. I mean, and 1971 was no slouch of a year. You had the Who coming out with Who's Next.
Yeah.
It was Jethro Tull, Aqualung out that
Yeah.
year also. I mean, it's
Led Zeppelin 4.
yeah. I mean, you know, you had to have your game on that year, and
Yeah.
still the Rolling Stones are like, yeah, no sweat. You know, it's just it's like not even fair. You know, and we haven't even mentioned like so many you know, tracks still off that album. I mean, we've covered most of them. I think there's only a few left because we still covered Dead Flowers. You Gotta Move, you know, off of there, which is great. You know, Sister Morphine is fantastic off that album. We've already covered Sway, but it's like, for crying out loud, you know, like the Stones, I don't know. I can't even, like, you know, if the Beatles had been still together in 1971, they probably, if they hadn't broken up already, they would have heard like, no mas. Like, yeah, I think we can end this now. But it's such a great album. I mean, all joking aside, what an impressive, and they just keep getting better, you know, dating back, like you say, you know, Beggar's Banquet. And really, I mean, if you go back to their Satanic Majesty's Request, where I think a lot of people thought, like, okay, well, this is the end of the Stones. Like, I mean, and I like that album, but it did not give you much hope for
Right.
Beyond that point, because it just felt like now you're not even putting out like great singles anymore. I mean, not that there's not, I mean, there's certainly songs off that album that were good, but there was nothing that led you to believe like their next 4 albums were going to be dynamite, you know, some of the best rock and roll albums ever made, because the Stones up to that point, up to Beggar's Banquet, had never had a complete album from start to finish that didn't have some filler on it. Even after had stuff like, you know, What to Do and Think and shit like that in there was, like, you know, like I like a lot of that album, but there's still, you know, stuff where it's like, all right, well, yeah, I guess we'll put it on the album. But, you know,
Yeah, we gotta have something.
yeah, we got to have something on here. It certainly wasn't, you know, up to the standards of Revolver, but, you know, Beggar's Banquet through Exile on Main Street. I mean, name another band that had 4 albums consecutively with that quality of material.
Which is why Goat's Head Soup and It's Only Rock and Roll are looked down upon, I think, because they compare it to those albums, and it's like nobody puts that many fantastic albums out, you know, in a row. I mean, there's got to be, they might still be really good, but you know, you can't compare them to, I mean, even Led Zeppelin with Houses of the Holy, which you hear people, you know, in the VC talk about all the time now, saying, oh man, this is like my favorite Led Zeppelin album. I love it. When that album was first out, a lot of people were like, oh yeah, this sucks compared to Led Zeppelin 4, because, you know, they were comparing it to that. It's like, it's a whole different ball game. You know?
Yeah, I mean, even Led Zeppelin had a presence, which was sort of like, oh,
yeah,
well, certainly not physical graffiti.
Right.
I mean, it's hard. You try, and back in the day, it was like you had to put out an album a year. There was no like, well, we'll wait 4 years and put out. It was like none of that. It was like, if you didn't put out an album every year, people are like, are they going to break up? What's wrong?
Yeah, we've forgotten about them.
Yeah,
you got to think of how much great music was around during that time. So, you know, somebody was ready to take your crown.
Exactly. There were a lot of people waiting in the wings to dethrone you. Absolutely. All right. So my number 3, I'm going back to my favorite album. I'm going with Monkey Man. And it's the same mood, the same feeling I get from the beginning of Gimme Shelter. You've got Nicky Hopkins with that doodle, that piano right
Yeah.
there. It's got like, oh, I love that. I could listen to that like on loop for 3 minutes, and you got that guitar riff, you got the tambourine, and then of course it's like Charlie Watts comes in with the drums to totally like send it into the stratosphere. But before that part, before Mick Jagger's vocal comes in, to me it's so majestic. I love the piano riff there, the guitar riff, the drumming, everything about it is just so perfect. It's another drugged out, hangover type song, but it's great. Mick Jagger with that snarling vocal of his, and I love at the end,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, this is great.
Yeah, he goes into another voice.
Yeah.
He ends up using that later. He starts using that falsetto a lot more in the 70s. But yeah, I think that might have been one of the first times he'd done something like that. All that high pitched scream thing he had going on. But yeah, the beginning of that song, you're right. It does that piano going, and then that that just chopping guitar.
Yeah, well, and I just I broke it down because I did again, not to keep going back, like check out my previous episode, check out episode this where I did that. But I did a video, again, it was probably like a year ago, where I did like my top favorite rock and roll intros of all time, and I kind of like broke down why that's one of my favorites. And and I don't know what it is, but like behind all that piano thing, you've got this kind of thing. It's like this hum kind of in the background that just sort of it like adds an extra layer to it. Go back and listen to it. Listen, because everybody, like, you got the piano, you got the guitar riff, but there's this a sound in the background which just is like so perfect. I don't know what it is because I'm not a musician, and I couldn't tell you like what's making that, but it's just God. I listen to that song and I want to like, okay, mixed vocal comes in, I'm like, okay, wait, let's track it,
start again.
do it again. It's the perfect intro. And sometime we're gonna have to do a video about our favorite like rock and roll intros of all time. That's going to be in my top 5 easily. And I could talk about Monkey Man all day, but I won't, even though it feels like I have already. But much love to the Stones and Monkey Man.
I don't want this guy on camera, but he won't leave me alone. So
I love it. I wish he was on camera more.
Of course, now I'm going to be covered in hair, like we talked about. So my number 2 pick is actually, I'm picking this because it is a showcase for Mick Taylor. It's one of the, I don't know, maybe 2 songs that he actually got a songwriting credit on there to go along with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. It's Ventilator Blues off of Exile on Main Street. But actually, even if I was just taking out that aspect, this is one of my favorite Rolling Stones songs. I love this song, man. When the Stones do that low down, dirty blues, like some of the other songs that are on Exile, that's great. To me, when I think of how they recorded that song, they recorded a lot of these songs in a basement, in a hot, stinky, sweaty basement. And to me, that song just fits it. That whole album, you can't even understand what Mick is saying half the time, but it's like it doesn't even matter. Yeah. It's just how he's singing it. It sounds cool. And that guitar in that. I mean, that song, Ventilator Blues, it's like, wait a minute, is this a Howlin' Wolf song that somehow he never recorded or something? Because, these guys sound totally authentic on this song. I mean, this sounds like, hey, you got some, some blues musicians from Memphis from the 1950s and recorded this song. Man, it is a badass sounding song. And I just think that, if I could pick a song that had a good way to represent exile on Main Street, it would be Ventilator Blues. Love that song, man.
Yeah, it's like if Howlin' Wolf and John Lee Hooker had a baby, it would be
yeah.
Ventilator Blues.
And then just the way Mick sings it, man, it's just awesome. I don't know, man. If you like blues or rock, I don't know how you wouldn't love that song.
Yeah, well, I do, and it's fantastic and great choice. I'm wishing I'd put that on my list now, but well, my number 2 is going to be, we already covered it, Can't You Hear Me Knocking, and going back to that episode that I did about Sticky Fingers. It's like, I think I played this intro, that opening guitar lick like 3 times over. It's like, just listen to that lick. It's the perfect like, and then you got like Charlie Watts coming in a little bit on the drums, but it's like, it's everything. Why do you love the Rolling Stones? Well, listen to this song, because it's everything I love about the Rolling Stones. It's adventurous, it's gritty, it's got, a riff that Chuck Berry himself would be envious of. They're all those British blues artists, rock and roll, the British whole Fleetwood Mac or Yardbirds or, whoever came along who was influenced, by the blues in the 60s. They were also scholars who sat at the feet of Chuck Berry and learned all those riffs from listening to those classic Chuck Berry songs. And Can't You Hear Me Knocking, it starts off like strictly like a Chuck Berry song. And then all of a sudden, like we've talked about before, it's like, holy shit, now we're into this Latin rhythm and it sounds like Santana. And I love that they make that detour. That ending could have been a song, like a separate song in and of itself, but it's just kind of like tacked on to the end of that track. It's like, well, this song was amazing, and now it's just totally blowing my mind because it's gone off in this other direction. You got Bobby Keys with that brilliant saxophone solo at the end there. It's so beautiful, and I love the way it ends too. It starts off fantastic, it ends beautifully. Again, it's like the Rolling Stones showing off. They do best, leaving everybody else in their dust. But I mean, we've already talked about it, but it's my number 2, and I mean, it could easily be my number 1, but the song above it, I love that much more. But I mean, holy shit, what an album.
Well, my number 1 comes off of Sticky Fingers. So, and believe it or not, we haven't even mentioned it yet. And that would be Moonlight Mile. I have, I don't know. When I hear it, and I probably mentioned this before because I'm old and I repeat myself, but man, I just remember coming home like one Friday night. I was still, just a young man. And, I'd come home, been partying, whatever, all that stuff, and come home, put the headphones in, and I'm playing that, and it comes to that song, and I'm still kind of buzzed, and it's a summer night and everything, and that song, man, it just takes you away, that it just transports you. It's got, and this is also another, whether we were doing just Mick Taylor things or not, this would be on this list because I love this song, but it is also a Mick Taylor showcase. Um, I know he took the idea because Keith Richards, once again, is not on this song. He doesn't play on this song. He wasn't in the studio. It developed from an all-night jam session, basically, that they were having. Mick Taylor took the idea from a thing that Keith Richards had been noodling on earlier, called he had like some Japanese type thing, and that's how he took that. They made that song out of it. Him and Mick Jagger made that song out of it. And then you talked about, you thought maybe that, I don't know what it was, Angie or whatever you said was the first time that strings were on a Stones. Strings were on this song. And putting those strings on the end, that was Mick Taylor's idea, to put those strings on there. Now, he didn't put them on himself, but it was his idea to add them. So, once again, Mick Taylor was such a important part of the Rolling Stones during their best time period. And, I think he should be celebrated. That's why I was glad you had this. You said, hey, you want to do the top 10 Mick Taylor era songs. That's why I'm trying to concentrate a lot on Mick Taylor's songs that he was really important in, just to show, hey, the Stones would not have been near as good without this gentleman in the band during that time period. And this, it's not just that. I mean, the lyrics are awesome too, and the way Mick sings it. To me, it's one of those songs you can interpret it however you want, right? But it sounds to me like one of those songs that they would write on the road, kind of being lonely, type thing. And, it has that kind of sound to it, but it just has a very haunting, majestic sound to it. And it ends the album, and it's just great. I just love that song, man. Moonlight Mile. That's like you said, the abundance of wealth of great songs on that album. It's not even fair. It's just amazing. There's so many bands that if they had just 3 or 4 of those songs from that album, they say, oh, we've got a classic album here. But the Stones said, oh yeah, look at this. Look at all these songs. There's not a bad song on that album, man.
Well, it's so stylistically diverse too. You've got sway, you've got the country of Dead Flowers, you got the gritty blues of You Gotta Move, you've got, like we said, the Santana Latin flavored rhythm of Can't You Hear Me Knocking, and then you got Moonlight Mile, which is an entirely different category altogether. I mean, they weren't just staying in one lane and doing it well. They were branching out and doing so many different styles well. I mean, there's so many different textures and styles on that album. They do it all well. They don't, there's not a clunker at all. From Brown Sugar, which is an amazing album opener, to Moonlight Mile, which is a great way to close out that album. I mean, it's just like textbook, the perfect rock and roll album. And it's never boring. It's always interesting from start to finish. But my number one is also an album closer. And I wasn't around obviously in 1969, but I'd like to kind of put myself in the shoes of somebody who is a Rolling Stones fan, and you just bought Let It Bleed and you're putting it on the turntable and you're listening. You got Gimme Shelter. You've got, obviously, like we talked about, Live With Me. You got Let It Bleed. You've got Midnight Rambler, which is a fantastic bluesy track. And you got Monkey Man. And then, the final track on the song. And what does it open with? It opens with like a boys' choir. Like, what the fuck is this? And there's a comedian, her name is Tig Notaro, and she does this comedy bit, and she talks about when she was in grade school, they had this thing in her class. It was, I don't know, it was a music class or some other class, but kids would get to bring an album in, and the teacher would play like one song for like the rest of the class. you would get to like play one song. And I kind of remember something similar to that when I was growing up. Like kids would bring a record in and the teacher would play like one song off that. It's just kind of like, you know, to show how cool they were, to like give the kids something. And so anyway, this friend of hers came up to her and was like, oh man, like I want to impress everybody in the class. What is a cool song that I could play for the class? And she's like, oh, you know what? You can't always get what you want. Got to play that. That's a fantastic track. So it's the end of you know, the class. And so the teacher is going to say, okay, well, now Jimmy's got a song that he, you know, this is his song that he's going to play. And she puts the, you know, the needle down on the track and you hear this boys choir and the kids looking over at her like, what the hell is this? What did you have me play? And it gets through the intro with the boys choir intro and then the bell rings. And I get to hear the rest of the song. And this kid wants to kill her because he just made it foolish in front of the rest. But anyway, it's a
It goes, no, wait, man, it gets better. Wait, is that a French horn? What the hell?
yeah. But I mean, it's so out of character for the Rolling Stones to have, of all things, a boys choir at the beginning of that. And then at the end too, like, it's like, well, we're not at the end, but they carry the rhythm, you know, the melody and all that at the end of it. But it's just, yeah, I mean, such an epic track. And I don't know, I'll go on record saying it's my favorite song of the 1960s. You may disagree, but I'm just saying for myself, I can't think of a better song. It's just got so many elements. You know, again, it's sort of like the whole, like the hangover after all of the, you know, the 60s, the peace and the love and the drugs and the free festivals and everything that went on. And it's sort of like that reckoning, you know, and it's almost like I feel like, because I was thinking about this a lot when I put this as number one on my list, it really kind of made me think a little bit more about it. It's almost like and I know it's going to sound silly coming from the Rolling Stones, but it's almost like a prayer in a way. It's like, you know, you pray for, you know, we pray for peace, we pray for love, we pray for all these things. And, you know, you can't always, when you're praying, you can't always get what you want. You know, you ask for a lot of things when you're praying. And I'm not like a deeply religious guy, but, you know, but when you're praying, you know, you're asked for a lot of things and you don't always get what you want. You know, we want peace, we want love, we want there to be no war, we want there to be no violence, we want there to be equality, we want there to be civil rights, we want all these things in the 1960s. And you know what? Sometimes you can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes if you pray hard enough, you might find you get what you need. And I don't know, I might be totally off base, but you know, I was like wondering if that wasn't sort of like part of it. I don't know, it's sort of like my own interpretation of it, but it's sort of like, yeah, we wanted all these things, we had all these, you know, all these ideals and all these aspirations for what, you know, society and humanity could be. We didn't get a lot of it, but, you know, at the end, you know, maybe we got what we needed, not necessarily everything we wanted, with all the peace marches and protests and everything. I don't know. I mean, I could be totally off base, but
no, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I get that aspect of it, and it totally does sound like that. You know, or maybe, you know, you could also look at it as, you know, kind of being happy with what you know, you get what you need, though. You know, you don't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you get what you need. And, you know, I think a lot of times we want, you know, we're always thinking about what we want as opposed to what we already have.
mm-hmm.
You know, and, you know, you've got a roof over your head and all this other stuff. And, you know, but I mean, your analogy totally works because, you know, when you hear people talk about prayer, that's kind of what they say. Well, you know, you don't always get, you know, praying is not a wish list. You know, sometimes, but you know, God gives you what you need type thing, you know. And
Yeah.
I'm not a religious guy either, but yeah.
Well, that's the great things about songs like this is there are probably, 10 other people watching who are like, well, I've got a totally different take on that song. And
I don't think 10 people are watching at this point, but you know.
yeah, well, the three people that are still left watching, they probably each, have a different interpretation, and none of them are wrong necessarily. The only one who knows is Mick Jagger, probably, but I think that's great because we can each kind of put our own little
I think those are the best songs too.
yeah, yeah. But it's just, it's sort of like Bills, and at the end it swells, and you got, the keyboard, you got the piano, you got the choir, you got Charlie Watts going crazy on the, and then it just sort of like, ah!
It's gone.
But anyway, I don't know. That's Exhibit D, why I am a big fan of that album. And I don't know if that song's ever been covered. I mean, it probably has, but
Well, I'm sure it has, but I can't think of anybody that's done it.
yeah, nothing that was too popular, probably. But yeah, well, that was a fun list.
Yes, a lot of great songs.
Yeah, yeah. We may have to do a list of our, favorite, our Ronnie Wood. Maybe that'll be the next video, the Ron Wood era, beginning with Black and Blue, which, if people shit on Goat's Head Soup and it's roll, they totally had diarrhea all over Blue. It wasn't.
I will say that's an album I appreciate more now than when I was first heard it, when I was young, first heard it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so that's an episode to look forward to. And maybe if all of our co-patriots bail on us next week, that may be the video we'll end up doing. Nobody loves us, but yeah.
We miss you guys, Josh,
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah.
guys.
See, this is what happens when you bail on us. You get
just ramble.
Two guys drinking and over enthusing about, geeking out about the Rolling Stones. So, but yeah, this was fun, Gary. We should do it again sometime. And
thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, everybody, thank you. Thank the three of you who are left watching, and take care.